I need to get this out because honestly, I've been sitting on this anger for 8 months now, and watching it all finally collapse is better than I imagined. I'm 32. I work in tech implementation. I make decent money, nothing crazy, but I'm comfortable. I drive a 2015 Toyota Corolla that runs fine. I rent a one-bedroom apartment. I'm single. By most standards, I'm doing okay. But to my family, I've always been the disappointment. My brother Chad is 29. He's married, has a house, drives a newer Ford F-150, works in sales management. My parents, Margaret and Ian, absolutely worship him. Always have. From the time we were kids, everything Chad did was brilliant and everything I did was average at best. Chad got a B on a test. Dad would take him out for ice cream. I got an A. Mom would ask why I wasn't helping more around the house. That kind of dynamic for years. The thing is, I learned to live with it. I moved out at 23, kept my distance, saw them for holidays. I was civil. I helped when they asked. When Dad needed someone to co-sign a loan for his truck 5 years ago because his credit was bad, I did it. When Mom needed help with her credit card debt 3 years ago, I paid off $8,000 for her. When Chad was between jobs 2 years ago and needed rent money, I sent him $1,500. I never asked for any of it back. That's just what you do for family, right? Last Christmas, we had dinner at my parents' house. Standard setup. My grandmother Monica was there, my aunt Kimberly, Chad and his wife. I showed up with a bottle of wine and some grocery store cookies. I'm not much of a cook and nobody expected me to bring anything impressive anyway. Dinner started normal enough. Ham, mashed potatoes, the usual. Then Mom started in with her comments. She asked when I was going to buy a house. I said I was comfortable renting for now. She said that was such a waste of money and didn't I want to build equity like Chad? I said maybe eventually. She did this thing where she sighed really loud and looked at Dad like I was hopeless. Then Chad started. He asked if I was still driving that same car. I said yeah, it runs fine. He said he just couldn't imagine still driving something that old, that he needs reliability for his family. I didn't take the bait. I just kept eating. But then Dad joined in. He said something about how, at my age, he already had a house and a wife and was building something real. He said, I was just coasting through life without any real ambition. I put my fork down. I said I was happy with my life and doing fine. Mom actually laughed. She said doing fine wasn't the same as doing well. Grandma Monica, who I thought might be on my side, looked at me and said they'd been talking, and they all agreed I needed to hear some hard truths. I remember that exact phrase. Hard truths. Mom stood up. She went to the kitchen and came back with papers. My bank statements. Actual printed copies of my bank statements from the last 6 months. I recognized them immediately. I have no idea how she got them. Maybe she went through my mail when I visited last summer and left some stuff in my old room. Maybe she got into my email somehow. I still don't know. She started reading numbers out loud. My checking account balance, my savings, what I spent on rent, what I spent on groceries, everything. She held them up like evidence at a trial. She said, this is what failure looks like. 32 years old and this is what you have to show for it. Chad was grinning. He actually high-fived Dad. He said finally someone said it. Dad started going through the statements with Mom, pointing things out. They talked about how I spent money on streaming services and takeout. Dad said I was living like a teenager. Mom said I was pathetic. Then Grandma Monica, sweet old Grandma Monica who used to slip me cookies when I was a kid, she laughed. She actually laughed. She said they'd been betting on when I'd end up homeless. She said she gave me another year. Chad said 6 months. They all thought this was hilarious. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, just sat there. Then I stood up, grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't say a single word. I just left. I drove back to my apartment and I made some decisions that night. The first thing I did was change all my passwords, email, bank accounts, everything. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything I owned. Then I started thinking about what I actually had that they might need. Dad's truck. The one I co-signed on 5 years ago. Still in both our names on the title and the loan. He makes the payments, but if he misses even one, it hits my credit too. I looked up the remaining balance. Still owed $18,000. Mom's credit cards. I didn't co-sign those, but I'd paid them off for her. She'd run them back up to about $12,000. Dad's name was on them, but his income alone wouldn't have qualified them. Then there was the big one. The house. My parents bought their house 12 years ago, right before the housing crash. They got a terrible mortgage rate, and their credit was already shaky. When they tried to refinance 8 years ago, they couldn't qualify on their own. I was doing well at my job. I had good credit, so I helped them. I became a co-borrower. My name went on the mortgage, the deed, too. Legally, I own a third of that house. I never lived there. I never paid a dime of the mortgage. But my name is on everything. They make the payments, about $1,800 a month. If they stop, it's my problem too. And Chad. Chad bought his house 3 years ago with help. Their help and mine. I gave him $15,000 for his down payment. He said he'd pay me back. He never did. I never pushed it. I figured it was just family helping family. For 8 months, I didn't contact any of them. I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on social media. I focused on work. I actually got a promotion in March. I started making $20,000 more a year. I got a better apartment in June, 1 bedroom to a 2 bedroom. I bought a nicer car in July, nothing fancy. A 2022 Honda Accord. I started going to the gym more. I felt good. And the whole time I was waiting. Because I knew eventually they'd need something. They always did. Last week my phone started lighting up. I'd blocked their regular numbers, but they started calling from other phones. Work phones, friends' phones. My voicemail was full. 47 missed calls over 2 days. I finally listened to one voicemail. It was Mom. She was crying. She said they needed to talk urgently. She said there were legal problems. She said the lawyers were saying they could lose everything. She said, please call back. I deleted it. Then I listened to another one. Dad this time, he said they'd made mistakes. He said they were sorry. He said they needed my help with some paperwork. He said it was about the house. He said they were desperate. Chad left 3 messages. First one was angry. He said I was being childish and needed to answer my phone. Second one was different. He said he didn't realize how serious things were. He said Mom was having panic attacks. Third one, he actually said he was sorry for what happened at Christmas. That it was messed up. That they all knew it was wrong. He said they really needed me to call. I haven't called back yet. I'm letting them sit with it. Because here's what I know that they don't know I know. The house payment was late in July. Just one time, but it triggered a review. The mortgage company looked at the account and realized my parents' income alone doesn't support the loan. They sent letters asking for financial verification. My parents can't provide it. The mortgage company wants either updated financials that show they can afford it, or they want to restructure the loan, or they want one of the co-borrowers removed. Problem is, if they try to remove me, the whole loan gets reviewed again and my parents definitely don't qualify. And if they want to keep me on it, they need my consent and cooperation. They haven't made this month's payment yet either. It's 8 days late. After 15 days, it reports to credit bureaus. After 30 days, the late fees start piling up. After 90 days, they start foreclosure proceedings. Dad's truck payment was late last month too. I got the notice. He caught it up, but barely. That loan is in rougher shape than I thought. He's been making minimum payments for 5 years. Still has 4 years to go. And Chad apparently got laid off in June. He's been scrambling. He put his house up for sale 3 weeks ago. I looked up the listing. He's asking $340,000. He paid $285,000. With realtor fees and what he still owes, he's going to walk away with maybe $20,000 if he's lucky. That is if it sells. They need me. They need my signature on paperwork. They need my cooperation with the mortgage company. They need my agreement to restructure things. They need me to either save them or let them drown. And I'm taking my time deciding which one sounds better. 8 months ago, they humiliated me in front of the whole family over my bank statements and my life choices. They laughed about me becoming homeless. Now they're about to find out what it actually feels like when everything starts falling apart. Part of me wants to just let it all crash, but honestly, I'm enjoying this too much. Watching them panic, listening to the desperation in those voicemails, knowing they finally understand that they need me more than I ever needed them. I've got a lawyer consultation scheduled for Friday. I want to know exactly what my options are, what I can do, what I can make them do. What happens if I just walk away from all of it? The calls haven't stopped. Yesterday, Monica called from her cell phone. I let it go to voicemail. She said she was sorry, that Christmas was cruel, that she's been worried sick about Margaret and Ian, that she hopes I can find it in my heart to forgive them. Too late for that, Grandma. Way too late. Update 1. So a lot has happened since my last post, and honestly, you all were right about everything. The comments telling me to lawyer up immediately, to not respond to any of their attempts at contact until I knew exactly what I was dealing with, to let them sweat it out, all of that was exactly what I needed to hear. I met with a lawyer on Friday, real estate and contract law specialist. I laid out the entire situation, the house, the truck loan, the money I'd given them over the years, everything. He spent 2 hours going through documents I'd brought and making notes. When he finally looked up, he said I was in a much stronger position than I probably realized. He also said my family was in serious trouble and they knew it. Here's what I learned. The house situation is worse than I thought. Because I'm a co-borrower and on the deed, I have legal ownership rights. Not just financial responsibility, actual ownership. 1/3 of the house is legally mine. If they try to refinance to get me off the loan, they need my signature. If they try to sell, they need my signature. If they want to do literally anything with that property, they need my cooperation. And right now the mortgage is officially 15 days late. It hit the credit bureaus. My credit score dropped 40 points. The lawyer said I have options. I can demand they refinance me off the loan immediately, which they can't do because they don't qualify. I can demand they sell the house and split the proceeds, which would force them out. I can let it go into foreclosure and wreck all of our credit. Or I can force a partition sale, which is basically where I sue to force the sale of the property because co-owners can't agree. That one takes time, but it's almost impossible to defend against. He also said something I hadn't thought about. The $8,000 I paid off from Mom's credit cards, the $15,000 I gave Chad for his down payment, the $1,500 for his rent. Legally, those were gifts. Unless I have documentation they were loans. I don't. I never asked for the money back in writing, so that money is just gone. I can't do anything about it. But the truck? That's different. I'm on the title and the loan. If Dad stops paying, they come after me. But I also have rights to that truck. I could technically take possession of it if I wanted to cause problems. The lawyer said it probably wasn't worth the hassle, but it was leverage. I left his office with a plan. Not just a vague idea of what I wanted to do, an actual step-by-step plan. And I felt good about it. Really good. Like for the first time in 8 months, I wasn't just angry, I was in control. Saturday morning, I unblocked their numbers. Within 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was Dad. I answered. He sounded relieved just to hear my voice. He started talking fast, saying they'd been so worried they didn't know how to reach me. They needed to talk about some things. I let him go on for maybe 30 seconds. Then I cut him off. I said I'd been busy. He asked if we could meet, maybe grab lunch or something. I said no. He asked when would be good. I said I'd let him know. He tried to keep me on the phone. He started explaining about the mortgage company, about how there was some kind of review happening, about how they'd gotten letters. I said I knew. He went quiet. Then he asked how I knew. I said I'm on the loan. I get the same letters. He didn't have a response to that. I told him I'd talk to a lawyer. Dead silence. Then he started stammering, asking why I needed a lawyer, saying we were family and could work this out together. I said I wanted to know what my options were. He asked what the lawyer said. I told him I'd discuss that when I was ready. Then I hung up. 10 minutes later, Mom called. She was crying before she even said hello. She said they were so sorry about Christmas, that it was wrong and cruel, and they'd all felt terrible about it ever since, that Dad had been sick over it, that Grandma Monica had been having trouble sleeping. I didn't say anything. She kept going, saying she didn't know what she was thinking, that she'd been drinking and everyone was ganging up and it got out of hand. She said they loved me. She said they needed me. That last part is what I'd been waiting to hear. I asked what she meant. She said the mortgage company wanted documents and proof of income and all kinds of things they couldn't provide without my help. She said they needed me to submit my financial information to show the loan was still viable. She said they needed me to sign some papers. I asked what happens if I don't. She went silent. Then she started crying harder. She said they could lose the house. I said that sounds like a problem. She asked how I could be so cold. I asked how she could have read my bank statements out loud to everyone at Christmas dinner. She didn't have an answer for that. I told her I was thinking about what I wanted to do and I'd let them know. She begged me not to wait too long. She said they only had a few weeks to respond to the mortgage company. I said I'd keep that in mind. Then I hung up. Sunday, Chad showed up at my apartment. I don't know how he got my new address because I'd moved since Christmas and didn't tell anyone. He probably got it from Mom somehow. Maybe she still had some mail of mine or found it through some records. Either way, he was standing at my door at 10 a.m. I almost didn't let him in. But I figured this was going to happen eventually, and I wanted to control when and where these conversations happened. So I opened the door. He looked rough, like he hadn't been sleeping much. He'd lost weight. He kept rubbing his hands together. He asked if we could talk. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on my couch and looked around the apartment, made some comment about how nice the place was. I didn't respond. Then he jumped right into it. He said he knew I was mad, that I had every right to be, that Christmas was messed up and he'd participated in something he shouldn't have. But he said things were really bad right now. His job situation wasn't good, his house wasn't selling, Mom and Dad were panicking about their mortgage, and everything was falling apart all at once. I asked whose fault that was. He said it wasn't about fault, it was about family helping family. I actually laughed at that. I brought up every time I'd helped them. The co-signing, the money, the bailouts. I asked where that family helping family energy was at Christmas. He said he knew. He messed up. Then he tried a different approach. He said mom and dad were old school. They didn't understand modern economics or how expensive everything was now. They grew up thinking if you didn't have a house and a wife by 30, you were a failure. That's just how they were raised. He said they were wrong, but that's what they believed. He said they compared us constantly, and it made them frustrated with me because I was doing things differently than they expected. I told him that didn't explain reading my bank statements out loud. He didn't have a response. He just kept saying they were panicking because dad's truck was having issues and they were worried about money and they took it out on me and it was wrong. I asked about the betting on when I'd be homeless. He looked at the floor. He said grandma was drunk, that she didn't mean it. I said she seemed pretty clear about giving me a year. He said everyone was drunk and stupid and caught up in mob mentality. Here's the thing, and I told him this, I don't care about their excuses. I don't care that they were drunk or frustrated or worried about money. I care that for 8 months I waited for one of them to reach out and apologize. Not because they needed something, not because they were in trouble, just because it was the right thing to do, and not one of them did. Now suddenly they're sorry? Now suddenly they want to make amends? Because they need my signature on paperwork? Chad tried to argue that they had been trying to reach out, but I'd blocked them. I said I blocked them after waiting 6 weeks for any kind of apology. 6 weeks of nothing. I blocked them in February. They didn't start trying to reach me until last week when the mortgage problem started. He got defensive then. He said I was being vindictive, that I was punishing them on purpose by making this worse. I asked him how exactly I was making it worse. He said by not helping with the mortgage stuff, by not answering calls, by lawyering up. I told him I had every right to protect my own interests, especially when they'd proven they didn't care about mine. We went back and forth for over an hour. He kept trying different angles. He played the family card. He said mom was having panic attacks. He said dad wasn't eating. He said Grandma Monica felt awful. He mentioned his own situation with the layoff and the house, said if I let mom and dad's house go into foreclosure, it would hurt all of us financially. I asked him how much money he thought I'd given them over the years. He didn't know. I told him. Nearly $25,000 total. Money I never asked for back. Money I gave freely because that's what you do for family. I asked him what I got in return. He said I was being ridiculous, that you don't keep score like that. But here's what I realized during that conversation. They don't actually feel bad about Christmas. They feel bad about the consequences. If the mortgage wasn't in trouble, if Chad's house was selling fine, if dad's truck was paid off, none of them would have reached out. They'd still think I was a loser who deserved to be humiliated. The only reason they care now is because they need me. Chad left without getting anywhere. He said he'd tell mom and dad I wasn't being reasonable. I told him to tell them whatever he wanted. Yesterday morning, the mortgage company sent me another letter. The account is now 22 days past due. Late fees have been added. They want financial documents from all co-borrowers within 10 business days, or they're starting formal review proceedings. That's the first step before foreclosure. Yesterday afternoon, Chad's wife called me. That was a new one. Her name is Kimberly, and we've maybe had 5 conversations in the 3 years they've been married. She said Chad was stressed beyond belief. She said they have 2 kids and they're terrified about losing everything. She asked if there was anything I could do to help with my parents' situation because it was affecting their situation. I asked how their problems were connected to mom and dad's mortgage. She said if my parents had to sell their house, they were planning to move in with Chad temporarily. But with Chad's house on the market and his job situation unstable, they couldn't handle having 2 more people in the house. She said it would be a nightmare financially and emotionally. So now I'm finding out about backup plans nobody told me about. Chad and Kimberly's house is in rough shape financially. They're counting on it selling. If it doesn't, if they have to take it off the market, they can't afford the payments much longer. And if mom and dad lose their house, the whole family's plan involves Chad somehow absorbing them. The whole thing is connected in ways I didn't fully understand. It's not just about the mortgage. It's about how all of their finances are held together with duct tape and hope. And I'm the one piece they need to keep it from all falling apart. Kimberly asked if I could at least talk to my parents face to face. Give them a chance to really apologize and work something out. I said I'd think about it. She said they were good people who made a terrible mistake. I said good people don't humiliate their children for entertainment. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. The lawyer said I should make them sweat a little longer. Let them feel what it's like to have everything slipping away. He said desperation makes people more willing to agree to terms. And I have terms, lots of them. The clock is ticking on that mortgage company deadline. 9 business days left, and I'm the only one who can stop what's coming. Update 2. This is getting intense, and I need to share what happened because honestly, I'm still processing it all. So after my last update, I had 5 days left before the mortgage company's deadline. 5 days for them to submit financial documentation proving they could afford the loan or start facing serious consequences. I knew they were counting every hour. Good. Wednesday morning, I got a text from Mom. Not a desperate plea this time. Just a simple message asking if I would come to dinner at their house Thursday evening. She said everyone would be there. She said they wanted to talk as a family. She said please. I talked to my lawyer first. He said it was probably an ambush, that they'd all gang up and try to pressure me emotionally. He said if I went, I should record everything on my phone. Legal in my state as long as one party consents, and I'd be that party. He also said I should go in with clear boundaries about what I would and wouldn't discuss. I thought about it for a few hours. Then I texted back that I'd be there at 6 p.m. Mom responded immediately saying thank you, that it meant so much that they'd have my favorite foods. I didn't respond to that. Thursday, I left work early and drove to their house. I hadn't been there since Christmas. 8 months? The yard looked different, less maintained. The grass was too long. There were weeds in the flower beds Mom used to obsess over. The paint on the shutters was peeling. You could see the stress in how they'd stopped keeping up with things. I parked on the street instead of the driveway. Kept my exit clear. Stupid little thing, but it made me feel better. I had my phone in my pocket, recording app ready. Mom answered the door. She looked older, like she'd aged years in 8 months. She tried to hug me and I stepped back. She got this hurt look but didn't push it. She said everyone was in the dining room. Everyone was Dad, Chad, Kimberly, and Grandma Monica. Aunt Kimberly wasn't there. Actually found out later she wanted nothing to do with this mess. The table was set. There was a roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls. My favorite meal growing up. The same thing Mom made for special occasions. I sat down at the opposite end from Dad. Nobody said anything for a minute. Then Mom started serving food like everything was normal, passing dishes around, asking if anyone wanted more butter. It was surreal. Dad cleared his throat. He said he was glad I came, that they'd wanted to talk to me for a long time but hadn't known how to reach me. I pointed out that they'd had my number until I blocked them in February, 6 weeks after Christmas, and nobody had reached out. Mom said they didn't want to pressure me. I said that was convenient. Chad jumped in. He said we needed to move past what happened at Christmas and focus on fixing things now. I asked what things needed fixing. He said the mortgage situation, obviously. I said that was their problem, not mine. Dad said it was my problem too since my name was on the loan. I told them I'd talk to a lawyer. The room went quiet. Dad asked what the lawyer said. I said the lawyer explained my options very clearly, that I had rights, that I had leverage, that I could do several different things depending on what I wanted to accomplish. Grandma Monica started crying. She said she felt terrible about Christmas, that she'd had too much wine and said awful things she didn't mean, that she'd been praying for forgiveness. I asked if she was praying for my forgiveness or God's. She didn't answer. Mom took over. She said they knew Christmas was wrong, that they'd talked about it many times since then, that Dad had wanted to reach out but thought I needed space. I asked how much space I needed before someone apologized. She said they were apologizing now. I said now that they needed something from me. Kimberly spoke up. She said this wasn't just about Mom and Dad, that Chad's job situation was affecting their whole family, that their kids were asking why Daddy was stressed all the time, that they might lose their house. I asked what that had to do with me. She said if I helped Mom and Dad with the mortgage, it would stabilize everything. I asked how their budget was my responsibility. That's when it clicked for me. They weren't just panicking about the mortgage. They were panicking because their entire house of cards was falling. Chad had been helping Mom and Dad with money. Mom and Dad had been helping Chad with other things. Grandma Monica had been lending money to both of them. Everyone was propped up by everyone else, and when one piece fell, they all fell. Dad started explaining. He said when they bought the house 12 years ago, they stretched themselves thin. They'd refinanced 8 years ago with my help, but the payment was still tight. Some months they had to borrow from Chad. Some months Chad borrowed from them. When Chad lost his job, it threw everything off balance. Now Dad's truck was having transmission problems and might need $3,000 in repairs they didn't have. I asked why they were telling me this. Dad said because I was part of the family and family helps each other. I actually laughed. I brought up Christmas again, read my bank statements out loud, bet on when I'd be homeless, laughed at me, high-fived each other, called me pathetic. I asked where the family helping family was then. Chad got angry. He said I was holding one bad night over their heads forever, that I was being petty and vindictive, that I was using their crisis to feel superior. I asked him if he remembered high-fiving Dad. He said he was sorry about that. I asked if he was sorry it happened or sorry I was holding him accountable. The conversation went in circles for over an hour. They tried everything. They tried guilt. Mom cried and said she'd been having panic attacks. They tried logic. Dad showed me papers from the mortgage company, like I hadn't received the same papers. They tried family obligation. Grandma Monica talked about how family is forever and we have to forgive each other. Then they tried anger. Chad said I was destroying the family on purpose, that I was enjoying watching them suffer, that I'd always been jealous of him and this was my revenge. I asked what I had to be jealous about. He said his life, his house, his wife, his kids, his success. And that's when it came out. The real reason they'd always treated me differently. Dad said they pushed me because they wanted me to have what Chad had, a family, stability, a real life. They said I was smart enough and made decent money, but I wasn't building anything. I was just existing. They wanted me to want more, to strive for more. And seeing me content with being single in a rental apartment driving an old car frustrated them because they knew I was capable of more. I told them I was content because I liked my life. Dad said that was the problem, that I'd settled for good enough instead of reaching for great, that Chad had ambition and drive, and I had complacency. That Christmas, they'd been trying to motivate me with tough love, and it went too far. Tough love, that's what they called it. Reading my private financial information out loud to humiliate me was tough love. Mom said they'd been talking to each other about me for years, worried about me, frustrated with my choices. They thought if they pushed me hard enough, I'd wake up and make changes. She said the bank statements were Ian's idea, that he thought if I saw how they saw my life, I'd be motivated to improve it. I asked why they thought they got to decide what my life should look like. Dad said because they were my parents and they knew better than I did what would make me happy. I said I was happy. Mom said I couldn't be truly happy living like I was. Here's what killed me. They genuinely believed they were helping me, that humiliating me was for my own good, that comparing me to Chad constantly was motivation, that showing disappointment in my choices was pushing me to be better. They'd constructed this whole narrative where they were the concerned parents and I was the underachieving son who needed harsh truth. Chad said something then that made everything make sense. He said they'd always been harder on me because I was the older brother and I was supposed to set the example, that he'd looked up to me when we were kids and then I just stopped trying, stopped competing, stopped caring about the things they valued. He said it disappointed all of them. I pointed out that I had a good job, made decent money, lived independently, and was financially stable. Chad said that was baseline. That was the minimum. He said I should have been reaching for more, building wealth, starting a family, making them proud. Making them proud. Like my entire existence was supposed to be about their approval. The argument got heated. Kimberly tried to calm everyone down, but Chad and I were going at it. He said I was punishing them for wanting better for me. I said they humiliated me for entertainment. He said it wasn't entertainment, it was an intervention. I said interventions don't involve betting on when someone becomes homeless. Dad banged his hand on the table. He said we needed to focus on solutions, that the mortgage deadline was in 3 days, that they needed me to submit financial documents proving I could support the loan if necessary, that the mortgage company wanted proof the 3 co-borrowers collectively had enough income. I asked what happens if I don't. Mom started crying again. Dad said they'd start foreclosure proceedings within 60 days. I asked where they'd go. Dad said they'd probably move in with Chad temporarily. Chad's face went pale. Kimberly looked like she wanted to disappear. Then Chad said something interesting. He said if they moved in with him, he'd have to take his house off the market because they couldn't show it with 4 adults and 2 kids living there. And if he couldn't sell, he couldn't afford the mortgage much longer. He said they'd all end up losing everything. So there it was. The full picture. If I didn't help, Mom and Dad lost their house. They moved in with Chad. Chad couldn't sell his house. Chad defaulted on his mortgage. Everyone lost everything. I was the domino preventing the entire collapse. I told them I'd think about it. Dad said there wasn't time to think. The deadline was Monday. I needed to decide now. I said I'd let them know by Sunday. Mom begged me not to wait. She said every day the mortgage was late cost them more money and fees, that their credit was already ruined, that they couldn't afford to let this drag out. I said I needed time to consider my options. That's when Grandma Monica said something that made me stand up and leave. She said I was being selfish, that I was putting my hurt feelings ahead of the family's survival, that Christmas was months ago and I needed to let it go, that holding grudges was beneath me. I looked at her and said grudges are what you have when people wrong you and face no consequences. I said accountability isn't a grudge. Then I left. They didn't try to stop me. I heard Mom crying as I walked out. I heard Dad saying something about me always being difficult. I heard Chad say they'd have to figure something out without me. I got in my car and drove home. I sat in my apartment for 2 hours just thinking, they're not going to change. They're never going to see what they did as wrong. They're always going to think they were trying to help me and I'm overreacting. The deadline is Monday at 5 p.m. The mortgage company needs documents by then. I have my lawyer's number pulled up. I have my options written out. I know exactly what I'm going to do. And it's going to hurt all of them exactly as much as they hurt me, maybe more. Final update. This is probably my last update because honestly, it's done. Everything I've been planning for 8 months, everything I've been waiting for, it happened. And I need to get it all down while it's still fresh. Friday and Saturday, I didn't contact anyone. My phone was blowing up. Text messages from mom, voicemails from dad, long texts from Chad trying different approaches. Kimberly sent me a message saying their kids were asking why grandma and grandpa were so sad. Grandma Monica sent a text saying she was praying for me to find compassion in my heart. I ignored all of it. I had my lawyer draft documents. I had my plan. I was just waiting for Monday. Sunday morning, mom showed up at my apartment. I don't know how she got past the building's front door, but she was knocking at 8 a.m. I opened it and she looked destroyed. She asked if we could talk. I said no. She started crying right there in the hallway. She said the deadline was tomorrow and they needed an answer. She said they couldn't lose their house. She said she knew they'd hurt me, but this was too much. I told her she had 24 hours to figure something out on her own. She asked what that meant. I said it meant exactly what it sounded like. Then I closed the door. She stood outside for 10 minutes crying and knocking. My neighbor came out and asked if everything was okay. Mom left. Sunday afternoon, Dad called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered thinking it might be work. He launched into this whole speech about family and forgiveness and how holding on to anger was only hurting me. He said they'd made a mistake, but I was making a bigger one by letting it destroy the family. I asked him if he remembered reading my bank balance out loud. He went quiet. Then he said he'd been trying to motivate me. I said he'd been trying to humiliate me. He said those were my words, not his. I told him I'd made my decision and he'd know what it was Monday evening. He asked me to reconsider. He said mom wasn't sleeping or eating, that she was making herself sick. I said that wasn't my problem. He said it should be because I was her son. I said she should have remembered she was my mother at Christmas. Monday morning, I went to work like normal. I had a meeting at 10. I reviewed some contracts at 11. I ate lunch at my desk. Around 2 p.m., I called my lawyer. I told him to proceed with everything we'd discussed. He said he'd have the documents filed by end of business. At 3 p.m., I called the mortgage company. I told them I would not be providing financial documentation for the loan, that I wanted to be removed as a co-borrower immediately. They said that would require refinancing the entire loan. I said I understood. They said the other borrowers would need to qualify on their own. I said that was their problem. They said if the other borrowers couldn't qualify and couldn't provide adequate financial documentation by 5 p.m. today, they would proceed with default proceedings. I said I understood, and I was formally requesting to be removed from the loan, regardless of whether the other borrowers qualified. They said they'd note it in the file and send me paperwork. The call took 8 minutes. At 4 p.m., my lawyer filed a partition action lawsuit. That's the nuclear option. It forces the sale of jointly owned property when co-owners can't agree. Since I own a third of the house and my parents own 2/3, and we can't agree on what to do with it, I was petitioning the court to force a sale. Even if they somehow scraped together mortgage payments, even if they found a way to refinance, it didn't matter. The partition action meant the house was going to be sold whether they liked it or not. The lawsuit would take months to work through the courts. But the filing itself was public record, and it meant that even if they tried to refinance or sell on their own, there was a legal clout on the title. Nobody would touch that property until the lawsuit was resolved. At 4:30 p.m., I contacted the lender on Dad's truck. I told them I was a co-borrower, and I wanted information about taking possession of the vehicle since payments had been late. They said I'd need to follow specific procedures, but yes. As a co-signer on the title, I had rights to the vehicle. They sent me the forms. At 5 p.m., the mortgage company's deadline passed. Mom and Dad hadn't submitted anything. The account went into formal default. My phone started ringing at 5:07 p.m. Dad? I didn't answer. Then Mom? Then Chad? Then numbers I didn't recognize. I turned my phone to silent and went to the gym. When I got home at 7 p.m., I had 23 missed calls and 14 voicemails. I listened to the first one. Dad screaming at me asking what I'd done, saying the mortgage company called them and said I'd refused to provide documents and demanded to be removed from the loan, saying they were in default now, asking how I could do this to them. Second voicemail was Mom sobbing. She said they were going to lose everything, that the mortgage company told them they had 30 days to bring the account current or they'd start foreclosure. that they couldn't refinance without me, that I was destroying them. Third voicemail was Chad. He said I was a vindictive piece of work, that I'd waited until the last possible moment to screw them over, that this was going to affect his family too, that his kids would suffer because of my grudge. I deleted all the voicemails without listening to the rest. Tuesday morning, my lawyer called. He said the partition lawsuit had been filed successfully. He said my parents would be served with papers probably by Thursday. He also said the mortgage company had contacted him asking if I'd be willing to work something out. I said no. He said he'd relay that message. Tuesday afternoon, Chad showed up at my workplace. Security called me and said someone was in the lobby asking for me. I went down and there he was. He looked awful. He asked if we could talk outside. I said I had 5 minutes. Outside, he tried a different approach. He apologized, really apologized. He said Christmas was unforgivable, that he'd been complicit in something cruel, that he understood why I was angry, but he said mom and dad were old and they'd lose everything, and did I really want that on my conscience? I told him my conscience was clear. I told him I'd spent 8 months waiting for any of them to apologize without needing something from me first, that not one person had reached out just to say sorry, that they only cared now because they needed me. He said that wasn't fair. I asked him when he'd planned to apologize if the mortgage hadn't been in trouble. He didn't have an answer. He tried another angle. He said, think about Grandma Monica. She's 78 years old. She can't handle this stress. I said she should have thought about that before laughing about me becoming homeless. He said she was drunk. I said drunk words are sober thoughts. Then he got angry again. He said I was going to regret this. That family is forever, and I was burning bridges I couldn't rebuild. That years from now I'd be alone and I'd realize what I'd thrown away. I told him I threw away people who humiliated me for entertainment. He said we humiliated you once, and you're destroying us. I said he proved my point. I went back inside. Security escorted him out. Wednesday, I got served papers from a lawyer representing my parents. They were suing me to try to block the partition action. Their argument was that I'd been on the mortgage for years, without issue, and suddenly forcing a sale was malicious and done purely to harm them. My lawyer laughed when he saw it. He said partition actions are nearly impossible to defend against when there's legitimate co-ownership and disagreement. He said they were wasting money on a lawyer for a case they'd lose. Wednesday evening, Mom called from yet another number. I answered because I was curious what she'd say. She begged me to stop the lawsuit. She said they'd found a lawyer, but he said their case was weak. She said they'd do anything. Apologize publicly. Pay me back money. Whatever I wanted. Just please stop the partition action. I asked if she'd thought about what I wanted 8 months ago when she was reading my bank statements to everyone. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. I said she'd made a choice. She said people make bad choices and deserve second chances. I said I'd given them 8 months to take that chance and they'd done nothing until they needed me. She asked what she could do to fix this. I told her there was nothing to fix. This was the consequence. She asked if I was really going to let them lose their house. I said I wasn't letting them do anything. They'd failed to maintain the mortgage, failed to refinance, failed to plan for their financial situation. That was on them. She said I was on the mortgage too. I said and I was removing myself from it, which was my right. She said I was punishing them. I said no. Punishment would be if I'd done something to them. This was me removing myself from their financial mess. She said it was the same thing. I said it really wasn't. Thursday, my parents were served with the partition lawsuit papers. Mom called me crying. Dad called me yelling. Chad called me saying I'd crossed a line. Kimberly sent a long text about how their marriage was being destroyed by the stress. Grandma Monica left a voicemail saying she didn't recognize the person I'd become. I didn't respond to any of them. Friday, my lawyer called with an update. The mortgage company had formally started foreclosure proceedings. My parents had 90 days before they'd have to vacate the property. The partition lawsuit would take longer than that, so the foreclosure would probably resolve before the court case did. Either way, they were losing the house. He also said Dad's truck loan had missed another payment. I asked about the process for taking possession of the vehicle. He said it was complicated but doable if I wanted to pursue it. I said I'd think about it. Friday evening, I drove past Chad's house. The for sale sign was still up. I looked up the listing online. They dropped the price $15,000. Still no offers. The market in their area was slow. They were going to be stuck with it. This weekend has been quiet. The calls have mostly stopped. I think they've realized I'm not changing my mind. I think they've accepted what's happening. Here's what I know. Mom and Dad have 90 days to figure out where they're living. They'll probably try to move in with Chad, but that's going to create massive problems for his family. Chad can't sell his house with 4 extra people living there. He can't afford his mortgage much longer on just Kimberly's income. Their whole financial house of cards is collapsing. Grandma Monica called me once more yesterday. She asked if I was happy now. if destroying the family was worth it. I told her I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped holding it together. She said that was the same thing. I said no, it really wasn't. For years, I'd been the financial backup plan, the cosigner, the emergency fund, the person who helped when anyone needed it, and the one time they showed who they really were, the one time they revealed what they actually thought of me. I decided I was done being that person. She said family is supposed to forgive. I said family is supposed to respect each other. She hung up. I'm not happy about any of this, but I'm not sad either. I'm just done. Done being the person they looked down on while depending on. Done being the disappointment who they needed when it mattered. Done being part of a family that valued me only for what I could provide them. They read my bank statements out loud. They bet on when I'd be homeless. They laughed. They high-fived. They thought I was pathetic. Now they're the ones losing their house. They're the ones facing financial ruin. They're the ones panicking about where they'll live. And I'm the only one who could have prevented it. That's what they finally understand. 8 months too late. But they understand it now. I've been getting messages from people saying I should forgive them. That family is important. That everyone makes mistakes. And maybe they're right. Maybe I should be the bigger person and help them. But every time I think about it, I remember Christmas. I remember sitting at that table while they humiliated me. I remember the laughter. I remember walking out in silence while they kept going. And I remember the 6 weeks after where not one of them reached out. They made their choice at Christmas. I'm making mine now. And unlike them, I'm comfortable with the consequences.